Go as fast as the organization can tolerate and maybe a little bit faster, but make sure you're clear about where you're going and why.
Today, I am speaking with Julie Gerberding, President and CEO of FNIH, the foundation of the National Institutes of Health. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Look forward to our conversation.
It is a pleasure to have you here. This is the series called Bold Advances in Healthcare, and I couldn't think of a better example than FNIH to talk about these bold advances. In that combination between your experience in academia and industry and also public sector, what are the three biggest lessons you learned in those roles that you now make use of?
First and foremost, sort of plan horizontally, but execute vertically. I think my career is probably characterized by taking organizations that were operating in a very vertical sense and welding them together in a more horizontal sense so that you really leverage the alliance and the capabilities that a lot of diverse people bring to the table. And at the same time, executing vertically so that you know who's accountable and you have the right people trying to get the right job done right. So that was the case in San Francisco when I built what was then known as the Prevention Epicenter to study and prevent infectious diseases in patients and their health workers at CDC. Likewise at Merck, knitting research, manufacturing, and the commercial organizations more collaboratively to prosecute the globalization of our vaccine portfolio. And then finally at FNIH, again, just bringing these groups that usually operate very efficiently in their vertical sense, but can even be more creative, more innovative, and I think more powerful at finding new solutions when they collaborate together. A second lesson learned is the one that all leaders know: build the best team. And I certainly have a fantastic team at FNIH. The third big lesson is be transparent. Try to reveal what you're thinking and go as fast as the organization can tolerate and maybe a little bit faster, but make sure you're clear about where you're going and why.
In your career, what was the boldest decision you've made to get to where you are now?
I think I made two bold decisions. The first was leaving the university in my cocoon of tenure to take a leave of absence and go to the CDC for my first job there. So going to work for the government wasn't an easy choice, but I did get permission to have a leave of absence, so I knew I could go back after a few years and resume my faculty position, which was my intent. I didn't expect to become the CDC director. But it felt bold because it broke norm to really leave the cocoon. But my biggest and boldest decision, I would have to say, was leaving public health and going to the pharma industry, which you can imagine was met with skepticism at best in many of my colleagues and friends in the public health system. But I really went to Merck because I really knew that Merck had a good vaccine to prevent cancers associated with HPV infection, but the vaccine was not available for the people who needed it the most in sub-Saharan Africa and other resource-limited countries. So when Ken Frazier asked me how I would like to globalize this vaccine, it was a dream come true because I knew how life-saving that kind of prevention could really be for women and girls who suffer the most from cervical cancer and related HPV cancer. So it felt scary to take that step. And I actually, in all of these cases, really was pleasantly surprised to find out that university is obviously very science-based, but CDC is also a very science-based culture, and so is Merck. So the underpinnings of the culture really didn't change that much for me. It was just the external suspicion and worry that affected me and made it feel bold at the time.
The Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium is one that you're leading. It's a public-private partnership in order to provide access to treatment for rare diseases. Tell us a little bit about that consortium.
Well, rare diseases in isolation are rare by definition, of course, but in aggregate, they're common. because there are so many rare diseases, and an increasing number of them appear to be amenable to gene therapies. When you're only studying it in a few people and you can't really do a gold standard phase 3 randomized clinical trial. And it creates a lot of uncertainty and worry among investors as to whether or not the company that's working on a specific therapy is ever going to get to the finish line. So the Gene Therapy Consortium, or the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium, was really designed to create a kind of standard approach to the manufacturing of vectors. And if we can define how the regulators will approve the manufacturing of these drugs, it sort of becomes a platform, and it makes it a lot easier for the next company. We're not inventing each time a new wheel. Same thing at the other end. Once we kind of have a regulatory path toward how we do approve drugs for rare diseases, then everyone benefits. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we published the first playbook on gene therapy, working with the whole consortium of the 33 partners that are involved in this effort, including the FDA, and really worked out some of the early lessons learned about manufacturing and regulatory approvals.